As we slowly switch over from the screen, Restream is having some fun today. Hey, y'all. Welcome to Sick of This Shit Publications. I'm Nick Paro, not your dad, joined by my friend Will Fullwood. And it doesn't seem like we're live on Substack yet. What is going on? Give me a second here. Let's see what happened. I think world is being weird right now. Let's see. Why are we not starting? View stream. Where's my stream key? Sorry, everybody. For some reason, we decided not to put the right stream key in on Intelligent Masculinity for Substack. So it's going to start here in a second. Just give us a moment here. I think this will only be on this recording, and for whoever's here with us on YouTube or Twitch, welcome. It's Intelligent Masculinity on Sick of This Shit Publications. I'm Nick Paro, not your dad. We are now live on Substack as well with our friends. Hey, y'all. I've got Will Fullwood from the Contraband Wagon with me today. We're going to have a really, really good, fun discussion like we always do in all of these conversations. Hit that heart as you come on in. Will, do you mind introducing yourself for everybody before we get into any topic of discussion today?
I would love to. Thank you for having me, Nick. For everybody, my name is Will Fullwood, creator of The Contraband Wagon, where I'm changing the conversation on race. I am an anti-racism activist, formerly a community college professor, formerly a K through 12 educator in New York City. And this is a pleasure and an honor to be here to talk about intelligent masculinity with my man, Nick Paro.
Thanks, man. I'm glad to have you. I'm glad that you're here. You and I have had a chance to have at least one longer form discussion before on your series on the Contraband Wagon, and I really appreciated the opportunity to come and talk with you. And I'm glad you're here with me because there's a lot of shit going on. We were talking a little bit before the show, and I want to get your thoughts on it live on the show for everyone to hear about the U.S. men's hockey team and their failure of masculinity over the last couple days. And I want to get your thoughts on that because the U.S. women's hockey team won gold and the U.S. men's hockey team won gold. And the sitting president of the United States called the U.S. men's hockey team while they were celebrating with Kash Patel to invite them to celebrate at the White House, and they took that opportunity up. And then in that conversation, he said, well, I guess I kind of have to invite the women too. I'll probably get impeached, jokingly, he says. Otherwise, the moment was there for someone just to say, not cool. Like, as simple as that. And it could have changed the entire conversation that we're having on how the U.S. men's hockey team stood up for their counterparts who won their gold medal as well at taxpayer expenses. Yeah, for both of them. They're both paid through our taxes. And I want to get your thoughts on it and what you saw out of that and what you saw this opportunity could have been or maybe needs to be for us, because you like to talk a lot about what we are doing and how we are doing things, not what we should be doing or could be doing or would be doing. But what do you see us doing in response to this to counter the narrative that they're putting out?
Well, I mean, to start with what we're doing in response, I see a lot of people writing articles and saying the right things on their streams about the fact that this was a missed opportunity, like you mentioned, right? And that this was another exemplar of men not standing up for women, right? Not recognizing the environment in which we're in, which is one in which women are oppressed. And that was just another exemplar of that oppression, where excellence is deleted, and as Black people, Many of us understand that very well, right? Where you're overlooked, where you're made to be invisible, right? Even when you reach the pinnacle, right? An Olympic gold medal. Hello,
Yeah.
like that is an extreme uh, accomplishment. It's the accomplishment of a lifetime. And for the person in the highest office of the land to diminish that publicly, I think that that just goes to show that our misogyny is alive and well, patriarchy is alive and well, and it's just as disgusting as it ever was. It's just as dehumanizing as it ever was.
Mm-hmm.
And what should we do? What should we do differently? I talk a lot about values, Nick, as you know,
Yeah.
and I think that what all those members of the U.S. male hockey team need to do is they need to reflect on what their values are and whether they did or didn't fall short of those values in that moment. Given the fact that they were parting with Kash Patel, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, Kash Patel is one of the most recognizable and obvious fascists.
Yes.
So it's a little bit like, I didn't have much expectation for them, once I saw that. So it wasn't really a surprise,
Yeah.
because the fascist movement and misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, all these things, racism, they all go hand in hand. So, and I think that what we need to do better, obviously, is to live in integrity. If our values supports going against these things, this racism, this misogyny, this transphobia, this homophobia, right? If our values tell us to go against these things, we have to practice living in integrity and actually executing on the values that we purport to have, which is a difficult thing in this country since it was founded on lies, right? And we've been promoting those lies for generations. So in some ways, right? And don't kill me, y'all, all right? But in my work where I do anti-racism work, I've had to learn over time to give some modicum of grace to people who screw up in these regards. And the reason I do that is because I recognize that the environment has been flooded with education and information to make people act this way. And the only people who are able to go against it are people who for whom their introspection leads them to question the fundamental values that they want to live by, and then recognize that those values are in conflict with the environment, and then choose. The last part is then choose to do things differently, right? And that
Yes.
is like a whole freaking process. That is a whole process that takes time, and also that requires the space and grace to go through the process. And so, professional athletes are notoriously selfish and egotistical and self-centered people, especially at the highest level. I was just watching a podcast with Venus and Serena Williams and
Yeah.
Serena's husband Alex Ohanian, and yeah, they were just explicitly talking about that selfishness that's required to be a professional athlete, to be the best. And Serena's like, I don't like calling it selfishness. I think it's growth. You're growing towards what you want to do, and she's exactly right about that. But so too is it selfish, and selfishness and self-centeredness has consequences. And those consequences oftentimes involve a lack of perception of the world around you at a deep level, because you're so focused on one thing, right? And understanding something like misogyny in the environment, a system of patriarchy, a system of white supremacy, these things require that same level of interest and curiosity and focus that they give to their Olympic sports, right? And generally there's no time or space for people to do that work, right? Like most people
Yeah.
don't get that at school, they don't get it at home, it's not reinforced through media oftentimes. So oftentimes at church, it's reinforced, right, to diminish women. So, yeah, I mean, it's just that's the environment. And this was just yet again another reflection of that environment. And I hope it helps people to, reflect upon their own values and their own beliefs and, whether they're willing to accept this environment. And through the years, we've seen that, yes, a lot of people, a lot of men, a lot of women too, are willing to accept things being this way. And for my part, all I can say is I don't accept it, and I actively fight against it. And actually, this example reminded me of something from my own life that happened when I was riding the New York City subway, and I saw a man harassing a woman and trying to physically touch her and get up on her in the middle of the subway. And she's moving away and he keeps moving closer to her and this and that. And I see other people noticing this, and no one's doing anything. No one's saying anything. And I put my body between her and that man. And this guy was definitely stronger than me and whatnot, but I wasn't going to allow, her to be unprotected in that moment. It was a choice that was based upon my values, and my values include fighting against misogyny, fighting against patriarchy. And yeah, I stepped between them, and eventually he kind of backed off. It did take a while. He stood his ground for a while, and so did I, and eventually he did back off. And she just quietly thanked me. And the day went on, but it was something only the three of us kind of were involved in that. And even though the train was full, nobody else acknowledged that anything happened. And I've been in that scenario many times, Nick, where I was the only actor, stepping in to try to do something in all kinds of scenarios. And I'll continue to do that. And I want to teach other people to do it.
I want to first acknowledge the courage that it takes to do those acts, because you have to be uncomfortable, or you have to put yourself in a situation where you are uncomfortable to live up to a lot of your values. Like, to actually act on and live your values, you have to sometimes be the one who is really uncomfortable in a situation, because you're doing the right thing. The right thing doesn't mean the easy thing. It means the right thing to do. And so first, let's acknowledge the fact that it's really courageous, and thank you as just another individual who would act in those and has stepped in those ways before. Doing that sends a powerful message to the person that you're with, that you're just a safe, good person, whether they know you or not. And I also want to really touch on what you said sort of at the end in passing, and that was, you then just went about your day afterwards. You got a quiet thank you and you went about your day. You didn't ask for anything in return for doing the basic. You didn't demand respect or demand more space for yourself. And I'm guilty of going, oh, well, I did something nice, I want something in return. You stepped in and just said, I'm going to do the right thing. And nothing was demanded or expected afterwards. And you got a thank you, and you were able to move forward in your day. And you both
let me make a point about that. So yeah. The reason why that was enough for me is because in my mind, right, what I did there was not necessarily for her. What I was doing, I was living the values that I chose for myself, right? And those values don't allow me to just watch what's happening there and do nothing. So even though, of course, I wanted to protect this woman, she was a Black woman, everybody pretended like she didn't exist and then nothing was happening to her. And I wanted to step in, but I was also doing it for myself, because these are the values that I've chosen for myself. I wouldn't be the idea that I would need some kind of outside acknowledgement of what I did, that was like non-existent, because I've already gone through the process of kind of whittling myself down to the fundamental values that I want to live. And when they're implicated, that's between me and me. You know what I mean? And yeah, this woman was involved and she was in danger, and I was able to, protect her to a certain extent. But the origin of that was my own individual personal values. And so that's why I could just go along my day, because even stepping in, that was also me going about my day, right?
Yeah.
That was part of me going about my day. It's like, okay, this came up. I'm going to live my values the way, the person I am, the way that I am, and that requires me to step in,
Hmm. And I think, thank you for building on that explanation of why it was okay that it ended after that. Like, I think that's really important, because what I've found, one of the big lessons I found from all of these discussions, is true masculinity, especially true intelligent masculinity, is doing it when, and this is a lesson I learned a while ago too, on my own in all of this and in my growing, is doing it, being intelligently masculine requires you to do it at all times, especially when there's no return. Nothing comes of it, especially in those moments when you're just doing the right thing because it's for you. The value itself is doing the right thing, and that in itself is the reward. And so that's one of those things I found, is like that self-awareness. And you've hit on it really well before we've even gotten into any of the questions. And this is going to lead to a really good interview and really good discussion around these questions. Is just the self-awareness aspect and that self-reflection, and for me, that's a huge piece of it. And is one of the questions I'll ask you later, is the how do you self-reflect and self-evaluate yourself. And that's the ability to know that you're doing your actions because they're your values and not for somebody else, even though it did benefit her and it benefits other people too in the process, but you were living up to your own values, so you were living with the consequences of your actions and values. And in this case, the consequence was you helped a woman protect her, you helped protect somebody, and you didn't compromise your values while doing it.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And it did require courage, like I had to put my body on the line, but there was no
mhm,
hesitation, guys. I didn't hesitate. Why?
yeah,
Because I already have settled, and we'll get back to this, I'm sure, when we talk about self-reflection, but yeah, I had already settled what my values were. I already knew what I was going to do, because I decided already, and so then I had to just act.
yeah. No, and I think that's amazing. So let's get into some of the questions. Let's start our actual question set. So, hey everyone, as you've all been here, welcome. This is Intelligent Masculinity on Sick of This Shit Publications. I'm Nick Paro, not your dad, joined by my friend Will Fullwood of the Contraband Wagon. And this is going to be another great discussion. We've had obviously an example of what intelligent masculinity looks like already. We've also had an example of what fragile, weak masculinity looks like in our early discussion around the U.S. men's hockey team, and the unwillingness of one of them to just stand up and say, yeah, not cool. That's all it would have taken to change the entire conversation. All it would have taken was, yeah, not cool. But they didn't. And it
No.
is not lost on me that the team is pretty much all white, and the women's team is very white as well. Obviously, hockey tends to be a lot more white folks than anybody else. However, it was again a moment of white men in a time where white men are the problem, continuing to perpetuate the problem when they had the easiest opportunity to just say, not cool. They had the easiest chance to listen to what others have been thinking. No, we gotta, yeah, group think in the locker room sucks, but that's an excuse. we continue to make that excuse for men, is that, oh, it's groupthink, they can get around, they can, it's just boys being boys. We never say that about a woman. If that had been the women's hockey team and a female president, do you think we'd be saying, oh, men, do you think we'd be having this conversation, or would it be men fucking flipping a shit because they didn't get invited to something because they they see themselves as slighted? Like,
Right.
locker room talk is such a bullshit excuse that, like, I know I'm thank you for the comment on it, and I saw your palm face um on that one, Ziggy, was because locker room talk is fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, even even when I wasn't as smart as I am now, or as intelligent or as grown up as I was now, I wasn't sitting in a lock. I wouldn't have sat in a locker room to allow that. I've seen shit like that. Like, we've settled shit like that with friends. I've been to soccer camp. I understand what hazing looks like. I understand what making sure your friends stay in line looks like when you do things on, like, on scale. Locker room
And,
talk is bullshit.
and again, it's not comfortable, is it? Right. You know, when you have to call out your own friends, you have to call out your own people that you love, when you have to call out yourself,
Mm-hmm.
these things can be definitely uncomfortable. But, in the end, living in integrity with yourself is going to be just a far better way of living for yourself and everybody else, in my opinion, and
Yeah.
in terms of like whether we're doing good or evil or whatnot, like to me, that's even a separate inquiry because frankly, whatever you choose, good or evil, just live it. Live it with integrity, live it with authenticity, and let everybody see who you are. And then we can deal with all the rest, your
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah. And integrity is a huge thing in all of this. And this is, we're exposing people now, or people are exposing themselves to have no integrity and showing it themselves. Whereas we are figuring out, or have figured out, and continue to figure out what it means to live with integrity with ourselves and live by our actions and values and stand up for them and speak loudly, because we've been told, at least men wise, have been told enough, specifically white men at this point, because a lot of us are the problem, is we've been told by our counterparts what they need. We've been given the keys to the car. We've been given the car. We've been given one that's fully fueled up, that has tires, that is ready to go, that has snacks, that has the directions already input so we can't get lost, that'll fucking park itself. We know what we need to do. We've been given all the tools. We just need to accept them and use them. And that's all we're asking of men to do. It's just suck less, is my phrase that I've started.
It's a
It's
good
all you
phrase.
really have to do is just suck less.
It's
Like,
a really good phrase. I like that, Nick.
just suck less. All you'd be better off. The rest of us would be better off too if you just sucked less. And to get there, let's have a great discussion on what intelligent masculinity can look like and does look like. And Will, you've already given us some really good discussion in this to begin us off, but I want to open this up with my starting question. This is a two-parter for you.
Okay.
Is the first half, because as we all know, the being a good person means you embrace your whole self. And in our society, we label that as either masculine or feminine side of the spectrums. And we add emotions into that. We add all sorts of everything into that, and how we classify things. So, however, masculine doesn't always mean male, and feminine doesn't always mean female. So I want to get your thoughts on who has been one of the most influential masculine figures in your life, and why, for either a positive or a negative reason, or both.
Mm, okay.
And it can be a historical figure. It does not have to be someone in your life like a parent, like Qasim Rashid spoke about the Prophet Muhammad. And we've had cultural references and folks like that, from musicians to coaches. So feel free to go wherever you want on this, on who's been the most impactful masculine figure in your life.
Such a really difficult question for me, Nick, because uh, you know, I haven't been super impacted by many people in my life, I would say.
Okay.
So that's one thing that makes it hard. The other thing is, masculine and feminine. I'm a gay man, so uh, it's reminding me of this one time I was in a club and I'm dancing, right? And like this like gaggle of all white guys like come and they're like watching me like I'm a piece of meat because I'm a really good dancer. And I'm dancing and I'm using what people would consider masculine moves, right?
Yeah.
Like the movements that I'm making, like I'm purposefully doing masculine moves, and everyone's like, all the guys are like, okay, yeah, this is great, right? And so at one point in the song, I decide consciously, I'm going to start doing all feminine moves. And I switched up the dancing in an instant. I started doing all feminine moves, and they scattered like roaches, bro. They all scattered. And there was one guy off in the distance kind of watching this all play out, and he was just like, flabbergasted by what had just occurred, and I just like looked at him and I was like giving him a thumbs up. Like to me, for me, like, yeah, I understand that masculine and feminine are a thing, but they're kind of just like made up, and so I never kind of leaned into anything like that. I don't have like a lens through which I look at something as masculine or feminine. Like I it is not something that is um in my mind, but I'm still going to try to answer you anyway because you asked. So I would say the first person who came to mind when you asked me is actually one of my oldest friends from college, Matt. And my friend Matt is like stereotypical racialized white dude, army brat, like, tall, muscular, like, good looking guy. You know, and he is one of the very first people I came out to as a gay man.
Okay.
So I realized that I was gay myself early on in college. Hey, Brandon's in the chat there. I just talked to Brandon on his
Brandon's
show.
awesome.
Yeah, I just talked to him about that on his show. You guys can watch that. It's on my feed and on Brandon's. And yeah, as soon as I realized it sitting on my dorm room bed, I walked outside of my dorm and I found him and I was like, "Hey, by the way, I'm gay," And he actually didn't believe me. It was quite funny. He did not believe me, and he thought I was just playing a prank, and like he just like wouldn't believe me, and it took the whole day until he was like, "Okay, this is real." But the reason I bring him up is because he has shown through the years an ability to, despite growing up in a largely conservative environment, right, and whatnot, he's shown a lot of ability to self-reflect and to make changes to the person he is and how he shows up,
Yeah.
based on learning new things. And um, he has saved my life, and he did that. He has just shown like a value for life and a value for truth and a value for integrity and a value for kindness. And he does that in a way that exudes strength. He does it in a way that is both strong and like unassuming somehow. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
he's not in your face, but he's in your face, and you can't like ignore him, but you also don't feel intimidated by him. It's it's kind of like just like a kind masculinity that that is very strong. And I always appreciated that about him. And I always felt comfortable with him because he was always able to, like I said, reflect and then change based on, an examination of his own values and whatever new information comes his way. And I just really appreciate that.
That's really awesome. I if you're comfortable going into it, as you mentioned, he saved your life.
Yeah.
And if you're comfortable going into this, could you expand upon that, what you meant there?
It's such a silly story too. And
Oh,
so yeah,
awesome.
I will tell you. There was alcohol involved.
Okay.
And
That's fair.
yeah, so anyways, I was like drunk and dancing in somebody else's dorm room. And as you can see, dancing is a theme. I love it. And I used to do it a lot, want to get back into it at some point. But I'm like spinning around and like going crazy and stuff. And in that moment, we're having fun. My friend Matt is there, and he has basically a premonition that like I might be like I might get hurt,
Okay.
So he sees this helmet. There's like this military helmet because the guy whose dorm room we were in was in ROTC. And he grabs the helmet and he straps it on my head. And I swear, Nick, not 3 seconds later, I trip and I fall, and my head would have been through an iron spike that was
Oh
exposed on the
shit.
bed. Like legitimately, I would have died. I would have been dead.
Jesus.
Like it literally hit the helmet. I was saved, and we were just both just like, "Holy crap, that was insane!"
How did that happen?
Yeah, that it was a very wild, random happening. But like, he had my back, and like it's just like a reflection of how he's been with me. He helped me start the contraband wagon.
Oh, that's awesome.
He was one of the very, very few people who was supporting me from the very beginning, like 5 years ago, and it's not like he knew a ton about race back then. He learned so much from being on the show with me, from hearing the conversations, from helping me find guests, from coming on and being a guest himself a couple times. And, it's just I really applaud him for his ability to transform, because when you are exuding masculinity, in my perception, I don't think you can be static. I think you have to be transforming and growing and elevating yourself to really display masculinity. And as part of that, I think you also need to be able to acknowledge, your missteps and your mistakes, which is always a part of learning and growing,
Yeah.
and he really has all those qualities. He showed me that through our friendship, and I just love it.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that you have that in your life, and that you have a friend like that.
Yeah.
So let's go to the second half of this question, since I'm putting you in a harder spot because it's not something you normally think around. Looking at the other end of the spectrum is, who has been the most influential feminine figure in your life?
That's a harder one. I gotta think about that. Who is the most influential feminine figure in my life? I mean, my mom is the first person who comes to my mind, but like, it's not really because of femininity, like it's not like her femininity, in my opinion, is not why she's the most important figure. It's her values again. It's the values that she instilled in me. That you're no better than anyone else and no one's better than you, and that kind of, and living that out, and just the way that she has always just held our whole family, like really just cared for us in every way you can imagine, not just our basic needs, but, cared about our hearts as well, and wanted to make sure that we grew up, it's me and my two brothers, that we grew up into men who she could be proud of to raise, and she really took care to do that. But again, is it because of her femininity? I don't know. I don't think of it that way. I really have no schema, I guess, for femininity and masculinity. Like my brain literally is like making this up, on the fly.
Hey,
So
no, that's fair. That's fair. If it's not a mindset you think in, then it's one that is easy to avoid trying to build on. But I think from like if we look at it in how society wants us to view things from from a masculine or feminine point of view, is it doesn't really matter who it comes from. In our point is like, if you're learning to be a whole human, you need all of it.
sure.
And both men and women and anywhere in between are strong, are weak, are emotional, are dumb, are smart, are intelligent, are in, because we have to do aspect that we have.
You're kind of breaking up here, Nick. I can't really hear you.
Am I? My
Okay,
internet
you're back.
does
You're
this.
back.
Am I? Okay. Sorry about that, y'all. Internet has been unhappy with me today. And so things, hopefully it doesn't get disconnected again. But I think that's a big point in it, is we need to stop associating values and morals with masculinity or femininity, and they just need to be human.
Yeah, and I see it all the time. I see them being characterized as masculine infinity all the time, and I think I think it's absurd. It's like you said. There's And even individually, right? Like I've been called strong, I've been called weak, I've been called smart, I've been called dumb. I've been called masculine, I've been called feminine, I've been called,
Mhm.
anything and its opposite. I've been called. So
Yeah.
it's just, I think that these lines that we draw are somewhat silly, especially when it comes to our values and how we should show up in the world. Right? Is it true that only men should be fighting against patriarchy? No, like everyone should, right? Like, is it true that only black people should be fighting against racism? No, it doesn't make any sense, to draw lines like this, in my opinion, which is why I never fed into it. And I think it really, you know, being part of the gay community helped too, right? Because,
Mhm.
um, you know, one time and one moment we're playing basketball with each other, the next we're voguing, and so like, and it's all us. And so, you end up realizing it and living that way a little bit easier, I think, when you're around other people in the community.
Yeah. I mean, uh, when I was in college, in person in college, not on my virtual college tour, um, I was in the music department, and we would break out into musicals, like randomly. And it's, you got to experience your everything. You just got to experience having fun and people letting loose. And it, as my friend Shared Sweeney at Centered America said, is you find a group you can, especially for men, that of other men that you can cry with. But you find a group you can cry with, and hopefully there's other men in it, because that teaches you how to express yourself openly at all times. And it doesn't matter that it's feminine or masculine. It's just that's a human response. And having those pathways makes you better, just having the opportunity and then taking it when it's there, like being given the key to the car, and actually just turning it on and just going, oh, this is super easy, I can do this.
Yeah.
Like,
and
it's
and
all,
being having an environment to do that, right, with people who you trust, right? Because
yeah.
trust is a big part of having that group of men that you can cry with, right? You have to be able to trust people to be vulnerable in front of them, especially if you're a man. And so it's I think that in order to find people that you trust, you have to really investigate people's values. because you're not going to be able to trust someone who has radically different values from you. And if you do that, then a conflict is going to arise inevitably at some point. And certainly when in a moment where you're implicating trust and vulnerability, right? And so, yeah, I just think that it's great. I have cried with my male friends. I have male friends who I can go to for emotional support, and it's been a godsend. I've never had trouble with it either. I think that I've kind of been like someone that a lot of men have actually come to me to find that because of my authenticity. I think that people are drawn to that and have been through my life, and they realize that I'm someone that they can be vulnerable with, they can trust. In college, I was nicknamed the voice of reason. I was named the Black Emperor, and these names were meant to show that I'm somebody who's gonna, give you the truth and give you how it is, but I'll do it in a caring and kind and loving way.
I love that.
Yeah. So, anyways.
Hey, at least it's one of those things too, as I've talked about, is like if you actually live your values and your values promote positivity and promote better humaning, others see it and acknowledge it very easily. Like it's very apparent to those or for those who do those things, because it's visible. It's visible on your character, but it's also visible on your like actual person. Like there's a very distinct difference between living your, like, we'll take this is an easy example. Stephen Miller lives his values. He lives them. He authentically lives his values. They're pretty shitty values, and you can see that on him. He looks like a shitty person.
Oh, yeah.
He looks terrible, and he looks just ugly, to be honest. In my opinion, he's
I'm gonna add demonic.
Demonic. I call him a smegalomaniac. He looks like a walking penis. Like I saw a picture of him. Somebody had drawn him as a penis, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good representation. Pretty spot on. And he's living authentically, and you can see it on him. Then let's take Will right here as our primary other example, because Will, you're right here with me. Is Will doesn't look like a walking penis.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Will's skin isn't broken and like wrinkled and gross because he takes care of himself. Physically, emotionally, all of it. Stephen Miller lives his values, but they aren't promoting positivity either in himself or others, whereas Will's are, and it's visible. And that's just a simple example of like just that physical characteristic of it. But the emotional stuff and the aura that you exude because of your actions, like it's tangible. It's a tangible thing that people either are attracted to or run away from.
Yeah. And another thing about Stephen Miller, like he is also just the prototypical I'm acting masculine type of man, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm yelling, I'm talking over you, I'm never changing, like I said before, static, right? Like my beliefs are unchanging. There's nothing you could do to change me. I'm immovable, and therefore I'm masculine, right? I
am
want
a
to
rock.
dominate you, and therefore I'm masculine,
Yeah.
So he is just slimy, disgusting fascist who is just such a poor role model for our young boys, the same as our president, the same as many of these people in positions of power. And yeah, part of, for me, what it means to be a man is to fight against these people in leadership and to try to advocate for better leadership, because what we've been accepting, obviously, guys, is wrong.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, we've accepted evil very deep into our ranks, and we've got to clean it out. And that includes kind of diminishing these narratives about masculinity that mean you need to be violent, you need to be aggressive, you need to be mean, you need to be immovable. These things are not what I think of as being masculinity. I think of it as showing incredible weakness and cowardice.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you on that. I put an article out last week called "On Offense." It's the one of the articles in the Intelligent Masculinity series where I call it out in that way: is if we fail to offer men and boys a disciplined, ethical, assertive model of masculinity, someone else will offer them a dangerous one. And that's what we're seeing. The dangerous one is you take the easy path and you don't have to do anything other than just be exactly who you are right now, forever.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and same goes with femininity. This is a better humaning project, which is for me, this is about masculinity in terms of you look like me, and you present yourself in what we deem on a societal level as a masculine individual. You you should probably take a listen. Like it's worthwhile taking a listen because there's so many others who present like me who are toxic as shit, and we see them and they have space and they have huge audiences and nobody calls them out on their bullshit. Well, we're flooding the zone in the other way. That's why I do 2 to 3 of these a week, like 2 to 3 of these interviews a week, and we have these discussions, is because we need to put it out there relentlessly, or
Yes.
or there's a void of space where all men get to listen to dangerous ideas that tell them they don't have to change. And so, my question for you, leading into the next question, is what does intelligent masculinity mean to you? Or how would you define it?
I mean, for me, intelligent masculinity means self-reflective. It means, again, being in integrity with oneself and holding oneself accountable. Those are really the things that it means to me. And to start with the self-reflection piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how can you be an intelligent, how can you represent intelligent masculinity if you don't know yourself? It's not possible. Okay, because if you don't reflect upon who you are, how you want to show up in the world, then you're going to show up, just like you said, as someone else wants you to show up, right? As the Nick Fuentes of the world want you to show up, as the Sneakos of the world want you to show up, or whoever else, right? Like these online influencers who talk about masculinity. That is where a lot of these young boys are getting their influence from, and that's who they're believing they should show up as. And part of the problem with that is because they're just taking in messages, right? But are they reflecting on those messages? Most of them are not. Most of them are just accepting, right? And it's not really possible to exhibit intelligent masculinity, in my opinion, without that self-reflection piece, because in an environment that is rife with misogyny and misogynoir, right? Um, the only way to fight back against that when the environment is saturated like this is through your own self-reflection, and your own decision to be different than everything around you. And so, yeah, self-reflection is a critical part of the intelligent masculinity. And then being in integrity with yourself, right? So you self-reflect, you find out, these are my values, this is what I believe in, this is what it means to me to be a man. Then you got to actually live it, right? You can't just think it in your mind, and this happens in the race context all the time that I see with people doing. It's like, oh no, I'm not racist, I'm not this, I'm not that. But then your actions, your words are not reflecting that reality that you're trying to present, right? So what is reality then? The
Yeah.
reality is what you do, not what you think you not what you think you are. And so living in integrity is incredibly important, and that's another part of intelligent masculinity. And then the last part is accountability, because we all slip up. We all make mistakes. Okay. Less and less over time if you're growing and learning, right? But part of the human condition is making errors. And so you have to accept that, and you have to hold yourself accountable when you make those errors. And you do that by acknowledging the mistakes that you made, by making any kind of repair that you possibly can, and then making a promise to yourself to do better in the future. and then actually doing better in the future. And that goes back to holding yourself in integrity, and that's like the circle of accountability there, you know. So yeah, that's what it means to me: self-reflection, being in integrity, and holding yourself accountable.
I think that's a really well thought out answer on that, and I want to expand on it here with a question from the chat, which I think is a good one, from our friend Cheech, which is, wouldn't you say intelligent masculinity will change as you get a different perspective?
100%. I think that's exactly right. And that's why earlier I was talking about this as a process, right? Because um you know, it's part of development to understand what intelligent masculinity would look like, right? Like you're not
Yeah.
like born knowing it. And if you don't have mentors kind of teaching it to you from a young age, then you're just going to be inundated with messages from the environment that as a boy, somehow you're more important than girls, or somehow you are elevated above girls, or somehow, like that's what it means to be a man, or and it's just a false narrative. It's a constructed narrative. And so of course, if you take in that narrative, then you're going to have to then unlearn it, right? And so it is a process, to go through life and change your perspective, reflect on what you believe, who you are, and get to choose eventually, these are my values, this is what I believe, whatever I learned, whatever the environment tried to teach me, whatever, it doesn't matter. What matters is what I choose. And um I think that's the beginning of intelligent masculinity, is that realization that the environment shouldn't be dictating your values, that you must dictate your values. That's the start. So yeah, I do think it's changes as you gain perspective, because once you
Yeah.
have that realization of this is who I am, right? These are my values, then you can start picking away at the habits you formed, the thoughts that you used to have, that don't align with those values that you've chosen. And that's when you shift your perspective over time.
And to me, intelligent masculinity, building on again on this, is in a simple, or like boiled down into the discipline of itself, which is like where we, in my mind, where I build from, and where my starting point, not the ending point of all of this, is that intelligent masculinity is the refusal to outsource accountability onto others, and the discipline to live with the consequences of your values and actions. And that, the reason I kept it broad that way was because it's not a strict set of rules that we follow. It's practices that we do every day over time, but it's not like every one of us approaches it in a slightly different way. It's a guiding post that leads us towards our goals. And yeah, our values may change with time. And I think part of intelligent masculinity is identifying what those values are that we want to change, and be willing to change them. And part of that is the sustained growth, is we're always trying to improve upon ourselves. And but I think one of the important things that, Will, you're talking about here is that it's that you're willing to not compromise your values just because society is telling you that your values need to change.
That's right.
Because society telling you your values needing to change isn't always a good change for you or for anyone. Like right now, society is telling us to try and normalize pedophilia and normalize child sex trafficking and the abuse of girls, and turning women and girls into less than human. That's what society is trying to force upon us. Not because we want it, but because that's who in power is trying to force it upon us. It's still upon us to have a discipline where we live with our values and our concept, and endure the consequences of those actions that we take to support them. And so I'm not going to let my values change, at least because society told me I needed to. I'll let my values change if I identify that that value is doing harm to others. And it sounds a lot like you would agree with me on that point
I do.
is,
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I do. I would just say to the question of do your values change with time, right? Like, um, in general, I don't believe they do. And this is my personal opinion, so I'll explain a little bit more about that.
oh yeah,
Um, I think I'm not saying that they can't, and I'm not saying that they never do. Okay. But I think in general, they rarely change. Because what it takes to change your values are the foundation of your thoughts, beliefs, and actions. That's what your values are. So from the time that you're able to have thoughts, take actions, do things, right? You have already established some kind of value system, and your value system is malleable in that early stage of like childhood, right? And
mhm,
but it solidifies very early, in my opinion. This is just my opinion, okay? But I believe it solidifies very early, and then changes are much more difficult to make as time goes on. Cheech is saying mine have changed by my experiences over time. Yeah, and that's something that can happen. Okay, but what you have to understand is that the longer your values have been cemented, the less likely it is that an experience is going to change them. Cheech, your values change based on an experience you had probably because, and I'm guessing here, and you can say I'm right or wrong, but probably because that experience sparked in you some kind of curiosity that you chose to self reflect about. For instance, I had a guest recently on my show, Pup Morningstar, who talked about being indoctrinated into white supremacy, living in a small, rural, mostly racialized white town, and that it kind of caused him to be this person who was a bully, who, got violent with people, who, was making people's lives miserable. And at a certain point in his early teenage years, he had that moment of self reflection. And that moment of self reflection involved him being able to see the person in the future that he was going to be. He saw himself presently, and he saw what that meant about the person in the future that he was going to be. And then he realized that that's not the person that he wanted to be. So that sparked in him a curiosity about himself and how do I change myself and what values do I really want to have. And that is when that values discussion kind of was sparked for him. So it can be that some experience leads to you to that curiosity and investigation into your own values. It's just my experience because I have a lot of experience talking to people about their values through the years and whatnot. It's my experience that most people will find a way to defend whatever value they've taken on in the past rather than become curious and consider changing their values. I don't know why that is, I don't know if that's like external forces or anything like that are um, that are kind of controlling that. But for my own experience, my values of truth, of honoring life and creating an environment where life can flourish, of kindness, of love, of community, of learning, these are values that I've cherished since I was very young. And I've never let go of these values. I just have found that that is the same for people who choose values that are not in line with mine, that they choose those values and then it's very difficult for them to transform them.
yeah, yeah. It takes a lot to evolve your values. It takes a very deep reconstruction, and I think that one of the challenges that we are fighting against and that we are actively working to deconstruct is indoctrination, is the indoctrination cycle of fragile masculinity. It's a choice. It's a purposeful choice that we went down, whether we intended it or not, but there was a choice that was made that turned this into the societal path that we were going on and encouraging boys down and then indoctrinated them into it. And we allowed figures like Nick Fuentes or Andrew Tate or Joe Rogan or others to take on active roles of leadership and mentorship for boys. We let them mentor our boys in these ways, and it changed. Plus, what is being taught in a lot of churches, what the values that are being instilled through Christian nationalism and pieces on those. There's a very broad like level of dehumanization towards women and anyone else, and a broad leveling of these values being promoted. How do you explain how children raised together can have vastly different values? Is one of them internalized and saw themselves and their self-worth and said, no, I don't believe this. The other bought into it.
Right. It's a decision. Exactly. Like it's a choice, you know, and it's a conscious choice too, which I also want to highlight. You know, like two people in the same family, first of all, we don't even know if values are directly being passed down. You know, not every family directly passes down values explicitly, right? Like this is the way that we behave because this is our values as a family or something like that, right? That's a conversation that some families have, but not all, right? And so sometimes values are just kind of like a hodgepodge of what people kind of get from their environment and what their families kind of tell them, what messages they get, right? And then it adds up to their values. But yeah, so like, I mean, and I just want to go off what you said again, Nick, which is that your values are determined through self-reflection, right? So let's say, and Ziggy, you say you asked because you're so different from your family. I hear that. I'm very different from my family too. But like, you just end up, yeah, let's say I received all these negative experiences and information from my family. Let's say my family was racist, right? And I'm hearing the N-word. I'm hearing derogatory comments about racial people who are supposedly less human, or, you know, just dehumanizing language and whatnot. Well, I have a choice, right? I have a choice. My choice is to kind of mimic that, which then can like kind of turn into me believing those things, which then can kind of turn into me creating a value of racism, right? Whereby this is something I value, you know, is perpetuating this. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to act this out. I'm going to say the things. I'm going to do the actions. And now that is one of the fundamental pillars of how I behave and who I am, right? Or you can hear those things and you could say, you know what? I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be someone who looks at other human beings and thinks that they're less than me. I don't want to believe that I'm a human being that thinks I'm greater than other people. You know, I believe in equality. I believe in these things. And it's really just a choice. It's a decision that you make. And not everyone in the same family is going to make the same decision. You know, and that's not just for values. That's for a lot of different things.
Yeah. And it's, again, that choice is really important. So asking the next question, because this is the choice, is how do you model intelligent masculinity in your life?
So as you know, I was a teacher for many years, right? And so I took that responsibility very seriously to model intelligent masculinity. And some of that would be correcting behaviors that I saw boys making that were completely unacceptable, in my opinion, especially in regards to how boys were treating girls. You know, I could watch it play out teaching high school, teaching middle school, right? That these young boys and a lot of the girls too are internalizing patriarchal ideas, right?
And he's back.
Oh, am I? Oh, okay, we're back.
And
yeah.
you're back.
So
we lost you at internalizing these patriarchal ideals.
yeah. So you can watch it happen, right? The way a boy grabs a girl, the way that um, he may not let go when she says stop, when she says let go, right? Not respecting girls' bodily autonomy, um, diminishing girls' accomplishments, you know. And I had to intervene in a lot of these situations and kind of talk to the boys about reflecting, right? Helping them self reflect, helping guide them through a process of self reflection and think about how they want to show up in the world. And, going through exercises where they would think about, okay, if I show up in the world like this, what are the consequences? What kind of person am I? What kind of actions do I take? What kind of consequences do those actions have? Right. Like just walking them through that so that they can decide for themselves, what kind of person they want to be, what kind of life they want to live. And sorry, your original question was like, how do I model it? Right. How do I
Yeah.
model? Yeah. So that's one thing. Another thing that I do is in my teaching, part of my teaching practice is highlighting my mistakes. Highlighting my mistakes. I think that's a very important part of it because there's this aspect of, kind of media masculinity, if you will, just making up that term right now. But like,
I like it.
Thanks. There's an aspect of it that's like, performative perfection, right? Like even it, and you see it with, Donald Trump and a lot of these other politicians, just like never admitting to any fault, never taking accountability for anything. And yeah, so I always try to do the opposite of that. I try to highlight my errors to show people like, hey, look, I'm not perfect, but by highlighting my errors and showing why I made the errors and showing how I fixed them, I'm showing accountability, right? I'm showing integrity. I'm modeling that for them. And it just creates an environment where other people feel comfortable admitting their mistakes, right? And then seeing, okay, what happens when I admit my mistakes, when I acknowledge that? Does the world end? Am I looked at as a less person? Am I looked at as being feminine? Am I looked at as, whatever it is, whatever stories, they've been telling themselves or the world has been telling them that they are because they acknowledge that they made a mistake. That all gets kind of, it disintegrates. It becomes illusory because you've now had an experience. And so, yeah, I think that just creating those experiences for people and also showing when it arises in my own life, right? When I make an error, I think that's extremely important to model intelligent masculinity.
I appreciate that you gave space, like you've talked about at the very beginning, was you learned that you had to give space for growth in others too. Like if a mistake is made, that they need, if they're willing to get the correction, the critique, and then learn from it, you need to, people should be given the space to learn. And you as a teacher, as like you're now like I've talked to so many people, and one of the common themes that I've gotten in a lot of folks and those who are truly like really just gifted at getting their information out are natural teachers and are people who want to educate others and find ways to offer space so that it's the easiest for the other to learn, not the easiest for you to teach.
That's a big one. And actually I think we got to put that under intelligent masculinity too, is in terms of how you communicate. Communication is a critical aspect of it because, and I've had this conversation with grown men too, which is like, are you communicating to try to understand, or are you trying to do something else? Because the way that you're using your words, are you actually trying to hear what someone is saying? Are you actually trying to have a dialogue, or are you trying to win something? Are you trying to dominate something, and a lot of people just don't reflect upon that. But yeah, it's incredibly important if you want to exhibit intelligent masculinity to communicate in a way that shows that you actually care about what the person you're communicating about thinks, and I think that that's something that, again, has allowed people to be vulnerable with me, because no one's ever questioning whether I care about what they think. No one's ever questioning that. It is something that just comes along with communicating with me. And so, yeah, it lets people take their guard down, because they're like, all right, like, this person's interested, this person's curious, and it's genuine curiosity. It's not fake. It comes from my values, right? To me, you talked about natural teacher. We're all natural teachers, Nick. We as human beings, it's part of the human condition that we teach and we learn. It's part of the human condition. And so, the point is that some people lean into it and some people shy away from it. Some people don't want anyone learning from them, but they're going to do it anyway. Some people don't want to be teaching anyone, but they're going to be doing it anyway. And so I think leaning into being both a teacher and a learner is a really important aspect of exhibiting intelligent masculinity, and being able to fluidly switch between those as well, and show 1 minute that you're teaching and the next minute you're learning. In my classroom environment, I gained a lot of respect from my students from acknowledging when I learned something from them, and letting them know, like, no, I'm not, performing masculinity because I got a job and I'm getting paid and I'm standing in front of the class as the authority figure over you and I'm dominating you in a classroom. No, like, this is an exchange between me and you. Even though I've been put in front of the classroom, I'm still learning from you. You're learning from me, I'm learning from you. And that's the way things actually are in reality,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kids are smart as shit. So like, let's not discredit children for having bad ideas. Like, they're smart as hell. We discount kids all the time in this country and around the world too, I would assume. I'm not from other places, so I cannot comment on what they do outside of the US explicitly, but we discount kids a lot here in the US and their intelligence level and how much they pick up on and what they know and don't know. And as someone who's gone through multiple college educations now and who has went through a primary level education in the US, like, the teachers I respected the most were the ones who admitted they made mistakes, because you knew that they were willing to be wrong and fix themselves so that you got taught the right thing too.
That's right.
Because they weren't sitting there. It wasn't about their ego. It was about the knowledge and about the actual act of teaching. And that's a huge, huge thing in all of this.
And I think intelligent masculinity requires ego death. It requires it. Like, you can't be leading with your ego and reflect intelligent masculinity. You have to recognize that you're not the main character, like,
And you don't have to be the main character.
Yeah.
Like,
nor do you have to be, nor do all the examples of people making themselves the main character and becoming rich and becoming famous or any of that mean that that's what you should be doing. And it's difficult because, I mean, our entire system here is built to make people believe that that is what they should be striving for, right? Is to make everybody worship them, everybody look at them, everyone want to be like them. That's what we teach people, unfortunately. There's this weird conflict between what we learn early on in our childhood years, right? Treat everybody with respect, don't hit, like, don't use bad language, all this stuff, right? And then by the time we grow up, all we see are all these examples of people who are using bad language, who are, diminishing people, who are dehumanizing people, who are just doing all the things that we were taught, not treating people as equal humans, like, just doing all the things that we were taught as kids not to do, lying consistently as a way of life, right? Like, and so I again, it just brings me back to what I also think is part of intelligent masculinity, which is giving people a certain level of grace. And I'm not talking about making excuses, or letting people off the hook or letting people escape accountability. I'm not talking about any of that. All I'm saying is, we must recognize that the environment has been set up for us to fail in teaching intelligent masculinity. that's our current environment. And so that's our starting point, at least in 2026.
Yeah.
Hopefully in the future we'll have a different starting point, right? But for now, that's the way it is. And so if we don't acknowledge that that's the way it is, right, then we're going to end up beating our head against a brick wall trying to teach people intelligent masculinity. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And instead of beating our head against the wall, the easiest way to do it, and as Will has discussed, and so have so many and all of the other men that I've interviewed, is you have to actionably live these values every day. The only way we actually make a real impact with intelligent masculinity and with correcting the old, failed, fragile, masked masculinity or media masculinity. I like that phrase. I'm gonna borrow that because I think that's awesome. But this like masked masculinity that we have, where you hide behind a mask and pretend to be someone other than yourself, it's a long process and project to break down. It's a generational, multiple generational project, most likely. Yeah, it's bitch and moan versus act. Well, not bitch and moan. It's piss and moan first act, because bitch and moan implies that is like is derogatory towards women. That just is. But and I'm not going to say it in that way. What I'm saying is the piss and moan and just sit there and do nothing and pretend like you want to make a change and then not actually confront anything in your life. You're just wearing a mask, just like all these ICE agents, just like all these men who are out here just acting like Stephen Miller and things like that. It's a generational project, and that's okay. We have to be willing to admit where we're at in our starting point. And as we do it more and give more men permission to follow the model of intelligent masculinity, more will do it. Like um, that's the that's the key, is men were given permission through generational traumas and generational indoctrination to act like this, to be like this, to be this mask of a man. We're doing the opposite, and it's going to take concerted effort on a lot of our parts, more than what we already have, and that's okay. We're going to make it through it. There's urgency in this moment, yes. I will not downplaying any of your not downplaying any of this moment. There's a lot of urgency in this moment, and it's a project that extends past just this moment. I want my son and his sons and their sons, or their friends, or my son and his friends, to take what I'm modeling or trying to model in real life, and what Will is modeling and trying to model in real life and others are doing. I want them to take that and bring it forward to others, so that when evil acts, what we deem as evil acts, when things go out of alignment with our fundamental values and beliefs, they're willing to act in accordance with that, and they're willing to do it without needing somebody there to say, hey, you need to go do that.
Yeah. And a big aspect of getting people there is mentorship, right? Like I actively mentor young boys to this day, right? I'm no longer a teacher. I stepped away from that. But I'm still mentoring young boys and men all the time. And I'm doing it actively and intentionally, right? Like these are people um who have grown up in a world where they were sent to school and they had a chance of being blown away by a gun. Like these are boys who have been really taught that their lives are kind of meaningless. A lot of them, especially the racialized Black boys, like who have just gotten every negative message about who they are, who they can be, from a very young age. And so mentorship and getting people to see that, listen, you don't have to just piss and moan. You actually have some power over this.
Mm-hmm.
You actually have all the power you need. and you need to grab hold of it. And grabbing hold of that power means grabbing hold of responsibility and accountability as well. And that doesn't mean that everything's going to go smoothly and you're never going to make a mistake, and that everything's fine now that you've accepted that. It means that you are on a journey in which you are building yourself up so that you can always show up with integrity. You can always show up as your authentic self. You don't need to wear a mask, because you've already tested that, and it's been tested enough that it's now just the core of your being. It's the person you show up with without effort, because it's your authentic self. You're lighter without that mask.
Yeah, you are. You feel better. You feel a lot better, because you're not oppressing yourself. And you need to unoppress yourself so that you can stop oppressing other people too. And that's a key, because like we said, is self-reflection, self-evaluation. So you've talked a lot about a lot of really good things that you do to self-reflect and self-evaluate and the power of it. What is your favorite self-reflection tool that you would recommend others try and at least look into, integrate into their life? What do you see as the most valuable self-reflection tool that you have?
So I don't know if you've heard of the Passion Planner.
I have not.
Yeah, it's just a particular planner. I actually don't use it myself, but I actually think it's really good. So I'm going to promote it here. My husband uses it, and he's been using it for several years now. And there's like a 6 months reflection and a year-long reflection. And it's really like a guided reflection for you. So it'll have you think about your previous goals and how you did. You can track your goals in various different ways that are set up for you within the planner. You can kind of figure out the origin of your goals, right? Like, so what are the values and beliefs undergirding your goals? And so it's just a really guided, well-guided process that kind of leads you through it, because a lot of people don't know how to do it. For me, I grew up reflecting, from a very young age. It's something that I was very much into my own mind and curious about it. I was watching an interview from an Olympic champion who was being interviewed about her answers to questions. She was like, they were like, do you even think about your answers before you speak? Because you always answer so thoroughly and like, like so quickly and thoroughly. And she's like, well, she said, I have an analytical mind, and not in a way that like I'm always analyzing things outside, but she's analyzing her own thinking. Right. And that means that she's someone in tune with her values, because if you're analyzing your thinking like that, it means that you care about what thoughts are coming to you. You care about filtering your thoughts so that you are living your values, right? And not going astray from them. And so one way that I want to encourage people of self-reflecting is think about you in the future. Think about you in the future, right? And project yourself into the future. And just like Pup Morningstar, who I mentioned earlier, who I interviewed on my show, who talked about when he did that, right? He saw a person in the future who disgusted him. He saw a person that he did not want to be. And so looking at yourself in the future and trying to prognosticate on who you might be based on who you are now is a very good way of self-reflecting, because it can create a kind of illusory cognitive dissonance that then allows you to do that kind of deep investigative work into yourself that is necessary to determine what your values are and, if necessary, to change them.
Love that. I think that's really powerful. And being able to see who you want to be, or you're going to end up being, that little self-premonition of yourself is a huge, powerful tool to evaluate. Like, if I make this act, am I going to turn into this will then lead me down this road? It's okay to game plan what that might look like. Absolutely. We do it like, you have to strategize. It's called wargaming in a lot of places, but you strategize on what action to take so that your next actions are based on that. And
then once you've established your values, right? Then when you're doing that hypothesizing, just like Cheech in the chat is saying here, long-term reflection, many what ifs. However, your values are a guide. Your
Yep.
values become your guide in looking toward the future. And then you're just no longer needing to really like do the same level of reflection. You're stepping into creation then, because you know that what you're creating is in line with your values at that point. And
Yes.
that to me is the fundamental nature of a human's power, is the power of creation.
Yeah.
We can imagine what we want and then we can create that. And if we can do it in line with our values, we're going to become exponentially more powerful.
Yeah. And intelligent masculinity isn't a value, it's the guardrails for values. It's your, like I said, it's the definition in my mind, anyways. It's the refusal to outsource accountability onto others, which is a guardrail. And then it's the discipline to live with the consequences of your values and actions, which is the guardrail of when you make that choice, you are now ready to live with the choice that you've made. And that's the heart of it, is we are putting guardrails without limiting ourselves. We're giving ourselves the ability to grow safely for not only us, but for everyone else around us. Like, growth is important, and doing it safely so that you know what you want to be and how you see what you're doing, move forward.
I'm so glad you brought that up,
Yeah.
because grow safely. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I don't have kids of my own, guys, but I have mentored many, many children through the years. I've taught thousands of people. And this idea of grow safely, especially for young boys, is something that I see so many parents missing. Most boys are not allowed to grow safely. Okay. And I think it's something that a lot of parents can learn to do a little bit better, which is like create an opportunity for your boys to screw up, like actually construct opportunities for that to happen, where the consequences are null. I've actually helped parents do this in the past. It's like, create opportunities for your kids to fail, so then you can talk about failure. You could talk about falling short, in a way that is safe and in a way that still leads to growth. But oftentimes that's not what happens. Like, we don't actually deal with these things until something drastic happens, right? Or something terrible happens. And then it's not really an opportunity with growth. It's about like dealing with the consequences or other things. And so I highly encourage any parents out there who are parents of young boys, try to get creative and think about scenarios in which you can give your children opportunities to fail, for which the consequences are virtually nothing. And then use that as a springboard to talk about what it means to be in integrity, what it means to hold oneself accountable. It's a critical part of development that needs to happen.
Here's a simple way, dads out there, that you can do this specifically as a man. Like, I've done this. Play board games with your kids. Play video games with your kids where there is a risk reward in the game. And if they lose, they'll get upset about it. Walk them through their emotions, talk with them through the emotions, coach them through resolving that failure. And if it's an explosive failure, you have to continue working on that until it becomes a gentled failure for them rather than the explosivity. I know, because I'm working on it, because I work with my son on it, because he explodes on things, not because he's a boy, but because he has an emotional regulation issue. And that's the important thing, is you cannot blame it on their gender. You cannot keep blaming boys on our gender. You need to be taught how to lose. And yeah, as my mom says in the chat too, is you need to be taught how to win. You need to be taught what it looks like to win graciously. You also need to be taught how to celebrate the little things. And this is something my wife and I were talking about this morning, just on a quick aside around this, because we were talking about it earlier in around the gold medal and the U.S. women's hockey team, is we need to celebrate the little things. It does matter that they won gold. It also matters that how they did it. It matters that they scored 33 goals and only allowed 2 against them.
Hmm.
We have to celebrate all aspects of the win. We do it with our boys too. If you start celebrating the little things when it comes time to celebrate the actual big things, they'll know there's a reason to celebrate, and they won't focus on the failures along the way. It's easier to be less focused on failures along the way if you have a goal in mind and you're actually celebrated as you're achieving the goal, even if you fall short. And we have to all as parents work on this. And I know I'm working on this and really working on this is how do I promote failure with the lens of learning? How do you
Yeah.
promote failing with the lens of learning? And how do you promote winning with the sense of learning too?
Yeah.
Because you have to learn from both, and you have to do them graciously, or not even graciously. You have to do them humbly and humanly. And you have to be able to see that even it's not this like participation trophy bullshit that was hoisted upon like the entire millennial and lower generations. Like, sorry, I didn't come up with those trophies. That was parents and adults who did that and then handed them to us because they were too inadequate to deal with their own self consciousness, that they had to voice their problem onto their children and say, I want a participation trophy. I didn't get this. So everybody gets everything. That's not what we're advocating. That's
Yeah.
not what I'm advocating, at least.
Yeah.
And in any way, is it's not a participation trophy. It's a celebration of you winning at things, but not as a competition against. It's not competitive. Conversations aren't a competition. Board games don't have to be a competition. Even competitive sports, in the end, don't have to be competitions between the players. Maybe it can just be competition between the teams, and the players all across the board are there for each other.
Yeah. And one
And
of the
so,
biggest competition
yeah.
is the competition between you and yourself as well. Like, I mean, uh, it's, yeah, we got to change the way that we kind of frame things sometimes in order to combat, like I said, these environmental pressures to align ourselves with narratives that uh, create this environment where women are dehumanized. That's what we need to do. And, I try to do it as much as I possibly can. One of the most recent conversations I had was with, a ninth grader. And I want to say also that him coming to me and talking to me about this is like a relationship that I had to cultivate over many years in order to create a level of trust for him to come to me with this and be vulnerable. And what he was coming to me with was basically, these are not his words, but this is what it was. His friends and him were having a conflict of values. That's what was happening. And he was talking to me about it. And I didn't tell him what to do, right? I asked him, and this is another thing that I think is good practice when you're trying to mentor young boys. Ask them questions that forces them to think and decide, okay? Because these boys, they have the ability, okay? They just need the prompting, the guidance, the facilitation. And that's what I gave him. I was like, well, is what this he was like, yeah, this guy was kind of bragging about violence basically and creating violence. And I was like, and I asked him how it made him feel, and I asked him if that's something that he valued, and so I was just guiding him through thinking about his own values and what kind of person he wants to be and whatnot. And I talked to him about how when someone is your chosen friend, right, you take on characteristics from that person and they take on characteristics from you. And that's part of what it means to be in a relationship. So if someone is doing things that are outside of your values, then you need to do something about it. You cannot let it lie. You decide what to do about it, I asked him what he wanted to do and we talked it out and we came up with a plan, right? And so just guiding people through that process sometimes is necessary because we can't expect people to just do it themselves. I don't think that that's a reasonable expectation in this environment or any environment, probably. Like, it's part of our job,
Yeah.
right? Is as elders to guide the next generation. I know a lot of that has been lost. Like a lot of kids are out here, and really their true life experience is that no one's looking out for their future, and it's a shame. And we need to kind of think, for those of us like myself who don't have kids, right? It doesn't mean that you can't be a mentor. It doesn't mean that you can't help shape the values of the next generation. So I just want to throw that out there too.
Yeah, I think that's where like all of this comes together. Is it's the stewardship aspect. It takes active participation to steward the next generations forward, to teach these things. And if we are unwilling to stand up and model, build, hold the line, and be active participants in it, that stewardship is handed over to dangerous voices and those who are willing to set the examples that we know to be wrong, where our values very clearly do not align with. We have given space on a societal level because we've allowed it to take hold, and we didn't step up and say, nah, we're done with this. We're going to put these voices out and promote. We, we let what they are now. Sorry, I'm reconnecting.
It's okay.
Can you hear me
back.
now?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. Sorry about that, y'all. As I speak into the disconnection of
It's always like at
your
a
screen
critical part
sometime.
too, when I'm like listening so closely.
And then I lose it too. Is all of this in the end is it's a guidepost. It's a guiding principle. It's a set of guardrails that allow you to live your values and actions. It's a set of guardrails that you need to teach people, because if you let there be a void of space, somebody's going to fill it.
Yes.
And that person isn't always going to be a good actor. They're going to just fill that space because they can, and no one has said no to them. And that our accountability is not negotiable. Our strength includes containment, like self restriction and self regulation, and participation is required. Like masculinity is proven in community. It's a communal sport. It is a team sport. It is a team game that we all need to be a part of and be willing to play. And if there are bad actors on the field, we have to get them off the field. We have to be the team that is the biggest and the loudest. And so intelligent masculinity isn't always loud, but it is forceful and it is accountable, and it's coming and it's here. And not even it's coming, it's here. And we're going to continue promoting it forward with folks like Will. And so this is where I'm going to shift gears a little into my favorite segment of our questions. And thank you for staying along with me. I really appreciate
of course. Yeah.
the time. And everyone in the audience, thank you for being here with us for this this really enjoyable conversation. Again, every time I have these, I learn something. I learn a lot of things, and I really appreciate it. And so this is my favorite part, because growing up, I was a choir kid, or I got dared into becoming a choir kid by a friend, a male friend of mine who was a vocalist. He and I were good friends growing up. We played sports together. We were good friends, hung out all the time. He dared me in high school to sing, and I tried out for the men's choir. I got into the men's and the select choir in my high school. And then we sang a clarion call to action every year after that. And it was the Mulan's "I'll Make a Man Out of You." It's the Let's Go Girls for men, or at least choir boys, of like, hey, let's
get down to
put on
business.
our let's get down to business. Let's go do some shit. let's go live our values and live our act and do some actions. And the chorus in there is pretty fun. And if you look at it from not just a physical aspect, there's some really good emotional and intelligence pieces that you can gather out of it. And the answers to these questions have been a lot of fun for me. Hopefully for the folks that I've asked them to. But for me, I get a lot of enjoyment out of the questions from these. So the chorus is a four-parter. And so we've got four. These are sort of lightning round questions for
Okay.
you. Of go as deep or as not deep as you want into this, because they can be really fun. So here we go. What does it mean to you to be as swift as a coursing river?
Swift as a coursing river. When you're swift, that means there's not barriers in your way. You know how you get those barriers out of your way? Through what we talked about: self-reflection, living in integrity, and being accountable. When you're doing those things on the regular, you're not encountering barriers. You're just acting, you're executing, and you're flowing. You're in that flow state.
Love it. Love it. That was a great answer. All answers are great. And that one was a really great answer. How do you embody the force of a great typhoon?
Ooh, the force of a great typhoon. By being relentless and persistent. People think that most people's expression of strength, right, is violence. That's like where most people's mind goes to. But there's a greater power than violence, and that's the power of love, because love is steadfast, persistent, insistent, and indefatigable. So that's what I think of when I think of that kind of strength.
Love it. Next, how are you as strong as a raging fire? And I will qualify this question so that it's clear or clearer on this. This is a when I hear raging fire, I'll frame this for you, is I see a well-contained but strong, powerful fire, not something that's wild and out of control. So using that framing, how are you as strong as a raging fire?
Okay, this is actually going to be a long one. Okay, so
Good. I love it.
So, as part of some work on myself, I engaged in some programs with the Mankind Project. I encourage everyone to look that up. I mentioned them to you before, Nick, when I invited you to their Zoom meeting. They're doing incredible work and have been for many years now, mentoring young men, helping them learn to deal with their emotions, and also doing emotional healing work that is incredibly powerful. And during their New Warrior training adventure that I engaged in, you end up kind of doing a meditation, a visualization, a guided meditation. And it's supposed to kind of connect you to your ancestors and whatnot. And you end up developing a name based on how you meditate and what journey you go through. And the name that I ended up coming up with was the Blue Flame of Empowerment. The Blue Flame of
Cool.
Empowerment. And Blue Flame for short. And so when you talked about a raging fire, in my meditation, there was a flame inside of a hollow tree that an elder guided me to and handed off to me. And I spread that fire to people all around the environment, people who were dancing around. I shared the flame with them, right? And we lit up the whole place with dancing and music and stars and whatnot. And that's kind of the way that I think about it, and the way that I act, and basically what I was telling you guys earlier. Even though I don't have kids of my own, I believe in mentorship. I believe in mentorship of young people. And I believe that that's something that's our responsibility. And it starts with us, right? The flame inside us, and making sure that we've cultivated it in such a way that we can feel proud of it. Our values, right? The things that we live by. And then we share and we teach other people and we spread that until we have a raging fire, right? Something that is, like you said, controlled but roaring, steadfast, and something that is going to spread as far as possible so that we can create an environment where women no longer have to experience the violence, the dehumanization, and the disrespect that this in the current environment has bred. So that's what I think of when I think of Raging Fire is, it starts within us and it spreads as we share what we've learned ourselves about being intelligent masculine men.
I love it. And our final question from this one is, how are you as mysterious as the dark side of the moon?
Mysterious as the dark side of the moon because I'm a human. Humans are shrouded in mystery. We're looking for mysteries everywhere else, but all you got to do is look right at yourself, look in the mirror, look inside yourself, and there's an infinite number of mysteries that you'll be able to discover. And so don't forget, guys, that introspection is a continuous process. Learning is a continuous process, and it's always going to include failure, and it's always going to include success, and it's always going to include growth, and it's always going to include sadness and grief, and it's always going to include joy and empowerment. So embrace it all, and that's what it means to me.
Love that. Thanks, Phil. That was fantastic. And my final question of the day for you in all of this is, where can people find you and how can people support what you're doing? Because I really enjoy promoting folks and getting to put others' content out there too. I have built a community of folks who are incredible and come back quite often, pretty much every show. So thank you, all the folks who are here on nearly every show and on all the replays and posts. And you guys are amazing. How can folks in my audience support you? And what can people do to get your work out there?
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for making space for that. The Contraband Wagon, guys, is the name of my movement. It's an anti-racism movement. Very similar to what we talked about in terms of guiding people, facilitating learning about masculinity, right? And intelligent masculinity, and making sure boys investigate their values, solidify them, and then live those values out while holding themselves accountable, right? It's a very similar kind of thing that I'm doing with the Contraband Wagon in the race context, allowing people to educate themselves on the subject of race, because that's a continuous process. Even me, who's been studying it for decades, I'm learning new stuff all the time. And then, self-reflecting on what you learned and what it means about your values, and then making a choice about whether you want to take on anti-racism as a value for your life or not. Okay. And then being accountable for that choice. So that is really the movement that I'm creating. And I'm doing that because I believe it has 100% probability, if we can get enough people to decondition from white supremacy, to cripple the system of white supremacy. And that is my ultimate goal. So if you believe in that work, if you believe in creating conversations on race in furtherance of that goal, which is what I'm trying to do, then that's why you would support me. And if you want to do that, you can join my Substack. It's free to join. You can also become a paid subscriber. I've got 20 people paying and trying to support me in expanding my reach. I also have a Patreon. You can find me at www.patreon.com/thecontrabandwagon. That's where I kind of give some insight into some of the background stuff with the Contraband Wagon. And of course, I share the links to all the content that I put out here on Substack and beyond. And you can also join my Twitch channel if you're interested in supporting me there. I do have some followers there, www.twitchtv.com or twitch.tv.
I think it's twitch.tv.
Yeah, www.twitch.tv/thecontrabandwagon. All of my stuff is free. You can join any of it for free. I also have a meetup group, racism discussion group. If you go to meetup.com/racism discussion group, that's my group. We've got like 900 members, and I do online cultivation on conversations on race as well. So if you think that someone would be interested, then you can join that or send them there. And one last thing you can do to support me is, I never intended to be online the way that I am, guys. this all happened because of COVID. My ultimate goal is to create a network of live events. Okay. Because I do believe there's incredible importance in getting people actually together in person. And so anyone who can help me facilitate that, maybe you know a venue that would be interested in your local community. Maybe you have a social circle that be willing to engage in one of these conversations. I'm willing to drop everything at the drop of the hat, get on a flight and fly to where you are and make that happen for the next, let's say 3.5 months before I leave the country permanently. Okay. So, that's all the ways that you guys can support me. And of course, just being here in the audience today, you've also done it. So I appreciate all of you. Grateful for you guys. Ziggy, it's meetup.com/racism discussion group. Racism discussion group.
And Will, if you could send me some of those links too and make sure I got them all, add them in the post show notes. Because I like to do full write-ups for everybody for our discussions that we've had, because each of us have valuable insights to add on our own. And it's nice to create a just a little bit of a profile for somebody on the who they are. And it's my way to reflect, part of one of my ways of self-reflection, to reflect on the events of the show. And then Will's conversation, just like all the rest, are going to feed really well into the overall written series, and all of the discussion that I'm going to be having there and continuing to build so that we can confront this and we can continue to do it and make it easier for others to join into and be a part of. So thanks everyone who has been here with us for this discussion and this show. Will, thank you so much for joining me for it. I've learned a lot, like I always do, and pardon the dog bells as they go off. Kids
No problem.
home from school.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for making space for this, Nick. I appreciate it so much, man. You're doing incredible work, and I'm so glad I could support you in doing it. And all of y'all, if you're not supporting my man already, help him build it up, because we need people like him out here leading the charge. Thanks for bringing us together.
Thanks, brother. And I'm glad we've gotten to know each other. And my final thing is, if you're on Substack, support Will on Substack. If you're not yet on Substack, go support him on Substack too. It helps build him up over there. If you're on Twitch, if you're on YouTube with us, thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us in this discussion today. If you're on Substack, thanks as always for being our primary platform of discussion and where we have our major chat at. You guys are amazing. You all are amazing for being here, being a part of this, encouraging these discussions, and responding and reflecting on them with us, and giving me places to learn and grow from too. And apologies as the dog bells continue to go off. But thank you. Thank you to everyone who's here. And Will, thank you for being a part of this incredible discussion, because it's been a lot of fun. And I cannot wait to sit and reflect on this and write up. Probably tomorrow, maybe the day after. I've still got to finish writing Jack's review up from last week. And so please, thank you all for being with us. Come subscribe to Will. If you're on Substack, hit the chyron in the top left corner to subscribe to myself and Will, and become a part of this movement, become a part of this activity to change what we can do, and what we are doing. And so let's stop being sick of this shit, folks, and let's start doing this shit. And that's what Intelligent Masculinity is trying to do. We're trying to do the shit here that needed to be done a while ago and needs to be modeled and done consistently. So thanks everyone for being here. Will, thank you so much. And we will see you all again later. Have a great one.